Hi, this project is presented to Camilo Alberto Perez and it's made by Sofia Santa Maria, Maria Jose Jaramillo, Jacobo Rios, Natalia Martinez, and Esteban Barrientos. The main topic that will be spoken is weapons of mass destruction. Nuclear, biological, radiological, and chemical are the three weapons that embody the term weapons of mass destruction. Although conventional weapons have been around long before, the term WMD was adopted during World War I after the United States attack against Japan in 1945. As defined by the United Nations, the world has adopted the definition weapons of mass destruction as atomic explosive weapons, radioactive material weapons, lethal chemical and biological weapons, and any weapon developed in the future which might have characteristics in destructive effect to those of the atomic bomb or other weapons mentioned above. Despite the fact that weapons of mass destruction haven't been employed since the attack on Nagasaki and Hiroshima in 1945, tensions created by these powerful weaponries has persuaded the international community to exclude WMDs from international competition and conflict. The implementation of strong international norms that developed against the employment of nuclear weapons include the NPT, BWC, and the CWC. As obligated by Article 5 of the 1970 of NPT, only the 5 original nuclear weapons states, United States, the Russian Federation, the United Kingdom, France, and China, are authorized to possess nuclear weapons and must work collectively to disarm WMDs on a worldwide basis. These 5 states also have what is known as a veto power in the UNSC. Despite the international community's effort to fully eradicate the use and possession of WMDs, some countries that remain outside of one or more of the aforementioned treaties continue to pose an imminent threat. Amongst the major adverse developments in North Korea's self-proclaimed acquisition of nuclear weapons. North Korea's economy is that of a failed state, raising importance to the development of WMD in order to secure political prestige and leverage during the international negotiations. Despite the fact that it lacks resources, it has chemical weapons, is developing long-range missiles, has the capacity to develop biological weapons, and has tested 4 nuclear devices. All this offers the DPRK added international status that comes with the capability of intimidating its neighbors. Also, it's a cheaper alternative to competing militarily with countries such as the USA, Pyongyang's biggest threat. In an attempt to denuclearize the Korean peninsula, the US withdrew its nuclear weapons from ROK. As a result, the DPRK signed an IAEA Safeguards Agreement on January 30, 1993, which they soon violated by not allowing the IAEA access to 2 suspected nuclear waste sites and a plutonium processing plant in Yongbyon. As a response, the UN Security Council passed Resolution 825 on May 11, 1993. Faced with the UN sanctions, the DPRK withdrew from the IAEA and threatened to withdraw from the NPT. In attempts to defuse the crisis, the agreed framework was created. Here, the DPRK agreed to freeze plutonium production facilities and place them once again under IAEA control. Since the agreed framework blocked plutonium production, the DPRK began a secret program to enrich uranium. The IAEA adopted a resolution calling upon the DPRK to clarify its uranium enrichment program. North Korea rejected such resolution, claiming it was based favoring the US. The US responded in December of the same year by suspending heavy oil shipments, leading North Korea to retaliate by unfreezing on nuclear facilities and expelling IAEA inspectors, as well as withdrawing from the NPT. Japan cut economic ties with the DPRK. In 2006, the situation escalated to North Korea's first underground nuclear test. As a result, China voted in favor of UN Security Council Resolution 1718, which prohibited states from transferring or providing luxury goods, heavy military equipment, or dual-use items to the DPRK. The DPRK agreed to abandon all its nuclear weapons and existing nuclear programs and return to the NPT and IAEA safeguards in exchange for energy assistance and a release of the DPRK's frozen Banco Delta Asia assets. Following the US government's inaction to remove DPRK from the list of terrorist states, Pyongyang suspended the disabling of its key nuclear facilities at Yongbyon and considered taking steps to restore them to the original state. On May 15, 2009, the DPRK successfully conducted one more underground nuclear testing. The DPRK also expelled nuclear inspectors and declared it will never return to the six-party talks. Many experts have seen such actions as a bluff. China once again voted in favor of the UN Security Council Resolution 1874, which tightened financial sanctions and trade restrictions on the DPRK. After a series of bilateral meetings with the US beginning in the summer of 2011, the US and the DPRK prepared for resumption of the six-party talks by announcing a Leap Day agreement on February 29, 2012. The DPRK promised to halt uranium enrichment and missile testing as well as resume international monitoring of its nuclear sites, while the US committed to food aid an estimated cost of $200 to $150 million. On April, North Korea conducted another satellite launch, proclaiming itself a nuclear-armed state. The US suspended the promised food aid, and UN Security Council passed Resolution 2087 condemning the rocket launch. The DPRK followed its December launch with a third nuclear test on February 12, 2013. While Russia announced it was ready to support additional sanctions on the DPRK's nuclear program, the Russian Deputy Foreign Minister said it will oppose any sanctions damaging normal trade and economic relations with North Korea. Furthermore, in a 15-0 vote on March 7, the UN Security Council passed sanctions that further constrain DPRK trade, travel, and banking, while imploring countries to search any suspect DPRK cargo. January 6, 2016, the DPRK conducted its fourth nuclear test, after which it announced that it had successfully developed and tested a hydrogen bomb. The 2016 test precipitated a new round of international condemnations and sanctions. On March 2, 2016, the UNSC anonymously decided to tighten its existing sanctions in reaction to the nuclear test and February missile test. Resolution 2270 compelled countries to inspect all North Korean exports and imports, seize the purchase of certain North Korean rare earth minerals, and limit the purchase of the DPRK's coal and iron exports. The key factor in the success of the new sanctions is still China's willingness to fully implement them. In particular, if China were to fully enforce the inspection provisions on all trade between it and North Korea, this will seriously disrupt illicit DPRK activities and slow cross-border exchanges in general. Russia also released a pointed statement in the aftermath of January 6 testing, labeling it a flagrant in violation of international law, and insisted that the DPRK shouldn't expect any forthcoming assistance. In addition to UN-imposed sanctions, the United States has moved forward with additional unilateral restrictions on North Korean financial flows. China objected the decision, stating that countries should simply fully implement and enforce Resolution 227. Then, why is it that UNSC and US haven't been able to stop Pyongyang from testing their missiles, harming their own people, and starving them to death just to keep the US in deterrence? It seems that to a certain point, that deterrence has had some repercussions in both UNSC and US military. They are just not willing to negotiate a give up upon their arsenal, at least not as long as first the US and UN retire their military forces from the neighborhood's backyards. And it seems that this is the fear of them all, pushing it too hard to the limits. This is basically why all measurements and resolutions have come to the same end, being ignored because of the lack of seriousness and toughness.